U.S. President Donald Trump says that his daily COVID-19 updates are not worth, quote, the time and effort. Skipping out on Saturday's briefing for the first time in weeks, the president took to Twitter around the time the briefings are usually held and questioned their purpose. He also accused the media of asking hostile questions and indicated the daily updates may soon come to an end. All of this comes on the heels of comments made by the president last week about using disinfectants to fight the virus. For a closer look at the daily briefings and how to cover them, we're joined by Frank Sesno in Washington, former CNN Washington bureau chief, White House correspondent, currently the director of the School of Media and Public Affairs at George Washington University. Frank, always a pleasure to have you on the show. Thanks so much for taking the time.
It's my pleasure.
Our pleasure to have you. Trump's comments and his decision to skip yesterday's briefing and the general concerns about his behavior in those briefings, what do you make of it?
What I make of it is that it's been a disaster in almost every level. As a matter of crisis communications, Trump has violated almost every rule in the book. He has not been consistent. He has not been calm. He has not issued information that people can actually use. And he's turned what should be an exercise in bringing people together and informing them and educating them into something that's really confused them and aggravated them. From a political point of view, which is why I think they're reeling this back, it reveals that he is the sort of sporadic and unpredictable communicator that he is. And from a health perspective, it's been just, as I say, confusing and a mix of poor information, actual disinformation, and just made up stuff that's actually dangerous.
As I'm sure you're aware, this has been a debate in newsrooms around the world. Do you carry those briefings live when you have a chance to hear Dr. Anthony Fauci, Dr. Birx, and also from the president, where fact-checking in real time is a challenge, particularly around medical issues? What do you make of that debate, and how should the media deal with the fact that the chief executive is speaking and that what he says is, as you've characterized it, concerning, dangerous, and misleading?
John, I think that, it is a debate. It's a very difficult debate because he is president of the United States. He is surrounded by some of the top health officials at a time of crisis. And so almost by definition, that is newsworthy. However, over all of this time, what he has demonstrated again and again and again is he's capable of going on for 2 hours and spreading misinformation. I think that what news organizations should do, if these briefings continue as they have, is to say to the White House, and we used to do this all the time when I was there as a correspondent and when I was there as a bureau chief negotiating on behalf of the network, what will the news value of this event be? We had a conversation. There should be a conversation, even though there's not much of one right now between the White House and the news media. But there should be a proper conversation as to giving some indication. Then the networks, if they want, can take the whole thing, or they can go and they can say, we're going to take 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. They make it based on the news value of the event. The networks could then say, we're cutting away at this point. It might be 22 minutes in. If you want to see the rest of the briefing in its entirety, we have that on whatever.com, right, on the online site. But there's a lot of news to cover. There's a lot of news that's actually happening, and to provide that kind of real estate to the President of the United States when there is not news value to it is not necessary. Otherwise, you take every time there's a briefing, there's a rally or something like that. You don't do that.
And yet, as we all know, this is a president unlike any other. This is a president that may not have predetermined news value to his comments until he makes a comment about putting ultraviolet light or cleaning fluid inside your body, and then it becomes news. Isn't that the challenge of covering this presidency?
Huge. Of course. And there are two other challenges. The other challenge is we're actually at a time of enormous crisis where people really want to know the very latest. We're also at a time of incredible polarization where a decision to cut away from the president will be seen and will be attacked by some as the lamestream media or the liberal media, once again teaming up with the deep state. So it's a fraught decision, which is why I think it's very important that you would say we're making this based on a news judgment that needs to be explained to the audience many times over, and people need to be told that the full, unabridged news conference can be seen someplace else. But John, I just don't think that you can have in any situation a case where an independent news organization turns over its air unfettered to a mayor, a governor, even a president for hours on end if there is no news value over time. And just because somebody says something unhinged doesn't by itself make it something that needs to be seen live.
On the other side of the equation, this has been an unprecedented time for seeing people with medical degrees and PhDs and an incredible amount of learning and experience behind them on national airwaves. In total, what do you think of the job the media has done in covering COVID-19?
Well, generally speaking, I think it's done pretty well. I would like to see more stories from more parts of the countries and the world, from the interior of the country, not just the COVID hotspots. I would like to see more stories, and there have been some very, very good ones, of what's happening inside these hospitals. I'd like to see people explained, I'd like to see explanations in some more detail about what we know and don't know about this disease. Because if people are thinking about going back out and starting their activities again, or communities are figuring out how to ramp that up, there are some real trade-offs, and we clearly have to do that. We cannot stay like this. This is not, will bankrupt everybody, and people, old, disabled, whatever, are feeling horribly isolated. We need to get back to work, but it's going to be very tricky, and people need to have more information, not less, on that. And it's, much of the coverage coming out of this country is very focused on the political coverage. It needs to be broadened.
One final question from today's headlines. The speculation, the great unknowns around Kim Jong-un in North Korea, and the idea that, as you say, the focus is on the efficacy of the president, the coverage of the president. What are the concerns about a potential crisis on the other side of the world with this, can I say, instability surrounding the U.S. presidency and the word of the president?
The instability, the very highly personalized nature of the relationship between the two leaders that Donald Trump has, really doubled down on over time. The inability to get the North Koreans to move substantively on the nuclear program and some other things, and the fact that the world is so focused and so locked down, really paralyzed in many ways because of COVID. It's a very, very dangerous time for a void like this, for a vacuum like this, if that's what's happening. And that is such a closed society. So it's a very dangerous time. Japan, China, the region are going to be extremely nervous. And this is at a time when typically, American leadership really matters. And that sporadic nature of American leadership becomes highly problematic now.
Frank Sesno, I want to thank you so much for dealing with a lot of questions that we had. I really appreciate it.
Well, it's my pleasure. Good luck to you. Stay safe and well.
You too. Thank you, sir.